It's time for the World Blitz Championships, and after winning the Rapid World Championship, Magnus Carlsen is trying to win another prestigious title. In the third round of the Blitz tournament, he's playing with the black pieces against an international master from Russia, and Magnus is the huge favorite to win the entire event, to win this game as well. But in Blitz, anything can happen. Let's have a look at this game. He's playing with black against Maxime Tsaruk. Tsaruk starts the game with the move 1e4, and look what Magnus is doing here on the first move. He's trolling again with his opponent. He's playing the move a6, looking like, okay, I don't care, I don't want a theoretical battle, I just want to get a game. In Blitz everything is just possible, but Magnus played this system a few months back at the European Club Cup as well. After the moves d4 and e6, his opponent Maximovic played here the move knight f3. So it will never come as a surprise if Magnus plays strange openings with the move a6 for instance. But after the move bishop d3, we get a totally different game. After d5, e5, we are back in some sort of French advanced variation. Black challenges the center with the move c5, white plays the move c3, and after the move bishop d7, knight f3, pawn takes pawn, white recaptures. We see one of the ideas behind that move a6, as black is playing here the move bishop b5. He just wants to trade off its bad bishop. The bishop on d7 is usually a bad piece because the pawns are placed on the same color. White has an option here. He can just keep the bishop on the board. Like for instance, normally you go back with the bishop to c2, but the drawback is that the bishop on b5 is now preventing the white king from castling. However, with a move like knight c3 or a4, maybe even later on, probably you can chase the bishop away or even take it, and then castling can be played later on anyway. But Tsaruk goes for a different move. He played here the move castling kingside, and that means that black can trade off the bishops whenever he wants. First, knight c6 was played. White played the move a3 to prevent any kind of annoying move like knight b4 at some point. Black played the move knight g e7. Now the knight comes to c3, so you see the knight and the bishop, they are both attacking the bishop on b5. Now it's time to react. Bishop takes d3 was played, queen takes d3, and the knight comes to f5. So this looks like a very normal structure which could arise from the French, from the Carlsen, many other openings. And black looks like he's doing okay. Now the only dark squared bishops are still on the board. But things are not that simple. Let's have a look. Bishop g5 is played, attacking the queen. Magnus goes for bishop e7. He wants to initiate more exchanges. He always feels comfortable when more pieces are coming off the board, getting more clarity from the position. But after bishop takes, he takes back with the queen. Look what's happening here. Now, it looks as if with the move knight takes d5, white is just winning a pawn, because the pawn on e6 is going to be deflected. If you take on d5, it's queen takes f5, and white is a pawn up. But why did white not play this move knight takes d5? You're even attacking the queen. Well, the problem is that the queen will just go away, back to d8, to attack the knight. Now, after the knight goes away, the pawn on d4 is attacked 3 times by the 2 knights and the queen, and black regains the pawn. Obviously, Magnus was hoping to see his opponent fall for this little idea. It's not really bad for white, but you don't really want to open the position. White has a space advantage. You would like to keep pieces on the board. Rook ac1 was played here, and now Magnus goes for more exchanges. He played a move knight h4. Knight takes h4, queen takes h4, and the queen is attacking the pawn on d4 together with that knight. So white is now defending the pawn, but he does it in a very clever way by playing the move f4, so interfering along the 4th rank, which means that the queen is no longer attacking the pawn on d4. Black castled here, and look now, it's a rook lift. Rook f3, and black has to be very careful, because if you do play a random move, let's say rook c8, the rook comes over to h3 to attack the queen, and if the queen goes away, for instance taking the pawn, it's going to be checkmate. Of course Magnus sees that coming. Rook h3 is a huge threat, as the pawn on h7 can be taken after that. So Magnus played the move g6, but now white is going to play for an attack, brings the other rook into the game. Rook from c1 to f1. Rook ac8 is played. and the rook goes to h3. Very nice play. The queen is under attack. You see why the rook is on f1, because now the pawn is well defended by the other rook as well. The queen goes back to d8, and here we have a very critical moment, because it looks as if black is having everything under control. But Magnus must have felt really uncomfortable facing the following move. f5 on the board, and looks as if this square was just covered sufficiently by black's two pawns, but this is incredibly dangerous. The move f5, white is just opening up the black king side. Let's have a look. If you do take the pawn, was not played in the game, but it's important for your understanding. I think the lines were not even calculated by the white player, but he just trusted his intuition, as after rook takes f5, the diagonal for the queen hitting the pawn on h7 is now open. If you do take the rook, queen takes f5, threatening mate. If the rook goes away, so that after queen takes h7, the king can try to escape, but not for long. It's queen h8, king e7, queen f6. If your king goes back to f8, it's rook h8 with checkmate. While if the king goes to d7, it's queen d6 with checkmate. So this is a very unpleasant situation Magnus is in. And he just ignored that pawn on f5. He moved the queen away to b6. But this is not a good move, but not easy to refute. But let's try to understand what is happening here. Black is trying to put pressure against the pawn on d4 together with the knight. If he can take with the queen on d4, then it's just going to be an exchange of queens. For instance, if white plays a move like f6, it's queen takes d4 with checks, and the queens are coming off the board. So there's no time to advance the pawn. White would love to get a pawn on f6, because if the pawn is on f6, together with the queen on h6, there are all sorts of mating ideas there. Now, what should white do? White should do something about that threat. And white can just play here this move, rook h4. Simple move, protecting the pawn on d4 one more time. And it turns out that there is no good move here for black. Let's have a look what may have happened if rook h4 would have been played here. If you do take the pawn on b2, for instance, then, okay, pawn is gone, the knight is a little bit more loose, and you see with the rook on c8 there are threats, but black's king side is totally vulnerable. Queen e3 is there with the idea to get a queen to h6 and threaten checkmate. If you do take the pawn on d4, it's just queen h6. You're not going to take the knight, you just want to give checkmate here, it's game over. Any other possibility? For instance, if you do take the pawn on f5 now, then knight takes d5 is just a brilliant knight sacrifice. Attacking the queen, the knight is intending to come to f6 if you ignore it, so you gotta take, but now it's queen takes f5 again, and nothing can be done against this mating threat of queen takes h7. Well, in fact, the only move here for black is to take with the queen on d4, but then you're giving up the queen, white is just gonna take with the rook, and it's just winning. So, beautiful line. Rook h4 would have been winning, so you see that Magnus was taking a lot of risks, and he must have realized that he was on the verge of defeat. Now, let's have a look what Tsaruk played. He is playing maybe only once in his life against such a strong player, not only top 10, but just the GOAT. And he feels like it's time to play for glory. But the move rook takes h7, it's really spectacular, a beautiful sacrifice, but I think it's based on a miscalculation. Look at this. I think he was looking at the following line. King takes h7 was played. Now the queen comes to h3 with check. King g8. And I'm pretty sure he was planning now to go initially for this move, f6. So with the move f6, you're just two moves away from giving checkmate. If the queen is on h6, mate on g7 cannot be stopped. But there is this move. Queen takes d4. And after king h1, you cannot take another pawn because of this move queen h6. It's going to be checkmate as the rook is covering the pawn on f6. You can take on f6 with the queen, but then you're losing the queen. However, I think that Tsaruk realized in time that black has this amazing defensive shot, queen d2. And the queen, it's doing a very important job here of keeping the white queen out from the h6 square. And you're a rook down, and you're no longer able to win the game. So that's something This must have been a real setback for Tsaruk. So instead of playing this move f6, he decided to play f takes g6, opening up the king side. But first, before doing anything else, take the pawn on d4. It's not just taking a pawn with check, but you're also centralizing the queen. Who knows, the queen can be very useful, helping out in defense. King h1, and now you take on g6, removing that annoying pawn, and you're opening up the f-file. So black is threatening to take the rook with checkmate. Queen takes e6, king g7. You give another check. Aha, maybe Tsaruk is thinking that he can give a perpetual here, but the king goes to h6, queen to h3, king g5, and after queen g3, it's not a perpetual because of this queen on d4. Because of that centralization, the queen can interfere on g4. Black is a rook up. White doesn't want to exchange queens at all. Queen e3, king goes to h5, rook takes f8, rook takes f8, you're rook up as black. h3 was played, but well, there's rook f1 with check, and White resigned because after king h2, you can just play queen f4, for instance, forcing the exchange of queens. And well, Magnus, ooh la la, he just escaped. That was very, very interesting game. I mean, it's a blitz game, it's a short game, but he could have just lost in about 25 moves. So I thought this was very special. Do you like this game? Please give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and I will cover many more spectacular games from this World Blitz Championships. See you soon again.